Memoirs of a Finster is a really great episode of All Grown Up. This is the third episode of the first season, and I'll get in with the main point of the narrative in a moment, but we also have a subplot involving this kid called Trevor who seems to be copying Tommy. And understandably, Tommy gets very irritated by this, and ultimately, what happens with that part of the narrative I love. I guess I'll discuss that now, so there will be spoilers from this point on as I go into a bit of detail about this part of the narrative, and then quite a bit more detail about the main part, as I feel the main narrative is really deep and definitely very thought-provoking. But the point with Trevor is that he's copying Tommy because he wants to be liked, and it's not something he intended on doing. He just saw that Tommy was somebody that he liked, he kind of admired him, and decided to copy him. And we have a really adorable moment where Tommy holds up this tiny little screwdriver. It is so adorable. It's not very often we get direct references to Rugrats, obviously outside of the actual characters. So to have something that's nodding back to the episodes of Rugrats where Tommy would have his little screwdriver, it's absolutely gorgeous. And then we see a whole bunch of characters all wearing the exact same clothes as Tommy, and also the same clothes as Trevor. And my favourite is Betty. Betty was wearing the same jumper too, and I just loved it. I thought it was very well done, very well animated, visually really engaging, and a fun part of the narrative. The main part of the story is a little bit more thought-provoking. And this is the fact that a bunch of the kids have been tasked with creating a representation of their family tree, and Kimi realizes she doesn't actually know that much about her Japanese heritage, and she really enjoys learning about it. And a lot of this episode is full of Japanese culture, and I have to take some of it with a pinch of salt. I'm going to assume it's all correct, but if anybody knows anything otherwise, please feel free to let me know. But it's a really nice introduction, in my opinion, to certain aspects of Japanese culture. As Kimi explores it, we the viewer get to explore it. She goes to Japanese club at school, which I think is a really great idea. And I think if anybody in Kimi's situation where their own heritage is not something they know much about, it could spark them to try and find a local club to learn more about it and meet people with a similar heritage. I think that's a really positive thing. And I also think it's great that Kimi's friends and family were willing to try out various traditional Japanese things and support her, particularly Chuckie. Unfortunately, Kimi seemed to lose sight of the fact that she now has technically dual heritage since she's adopted and she is also a Finster. And there's a moment where she says she doesn't feel like a real Finster, and Chuckie kind of takes offense to this. And I can understand where he's coming from, because his family have been nothing but welcoming to her since she was a tiny little toddler, and she's fully integrated in that family. And for her to turn around and say, I'm not a real Finster, that's going to hurt. I can kind of understand her perspective, but I also understand Chuckie's response. And I think the episode does a really fantastic job of showing both sides. It definitely helps to highlight that somebody who is adopted is going to be naturally curious about their heritage if it's different from their adopted family. However, I also don't think her mother did a very good job of raising her if she basically didn't teach her anything about her heritage. That seems an oversight on her mother's part. But either way, it helps to show that if you're from a different heritage to your adopted family, it's natural to be curious, it's healthy to want to research it. But it also did a great job of showing that if you're part of the adopted family already, as in you were the family the child was adopted into, and they suddenly say, well, I don't actually feel like I'm part of the family, even though you have done nothing but make them feel reassured that they're part of the family, welcomed them in, treated them like they're a blood relative, that's going to hurt. And there's a little bit of information there that says you need to be careful how you phrase things because you could really, really hurt somebody's feelings. It would be different, of course, if she'd been adopted into the family and was never treated like a blood relative, but that's absolutely not the case. I think it's safe to say that as far as Chuckie is concerned, they're brother and sister. There's no adopted sibling aspect there for Chuckie and Kimi, and her words hurt. So I think it's a very balanced episode, very thought-provoking, really helps to show different perspectives, and we have the added bonus that we get quite a bit of knowledge and information shared about Japanese culture. So that I think worked out really well as well. Then you have the narrative with Tommy, which is just a little bit of fun, really, and very well animated. So in all, Memoirs of a Finster is a really good episode, and definitely one that I enjoyed.